It's Messi! It is the cleanest of clean finishes from the best on the planet.
It's time for the biggest sports stories.
Liverpool, the champions of Europe, are top of the world.
The biggest interviews.
That such a great spectacle is ruined by such thuggish behavior.
And all the analysis right here.
He's the one player that has the arrogance to think that he can play in any stadium in the world and any pitch in the world in front of any player in the world and take them on.
Every weekday, it's my sport, it's your sport. It's ZiFM Sport. Let's join the team for the biggest show in the world of sport on ZiFM Stereo. My station, your station.
Wacky Wednesday, good evening and welcome Zimbabwe to your favorite sports show on your favorite station, ZiFM Sport on ZiFM Stereo, my station, your station. Now, over the course of time, Zimbabwe has had some wackily named coaches. We've had Rudi Gutendorf, Reinhard Fabisch, maybe. We've had Clemens Westerhoff. We've had Pagels. We've had Valinhos, who a lot of people Googled only to discover he was a famous Brazilian fisherman. And now we've arguably the wackiest coach of all in terms of names, Zdravko Logarusic. And he is concerned. Why is he concerned? Game time for crucial players at their respective clubs ahead of the back-to-back fixtures against African champions Algeria. That is our lead story on today's edition of ZiFM Sport. And we have a leading team of pundits, voices out of the world of sport. That team is Christine Midzi, Barry Manandi, our producer Sean Taferinyika, and my name is Mike Madon. I'll also give you some international sport where 5 is the number. The Mumbai Indians securing a 5th IPL title with a 5-wicket win over the Delhi Capitals in the final of the Indian Premier League that was played yesterday.
In Around the World in 60, we lift off in Brisbane, where All Blacks prop Ofatunga Fasti has been suspended for 3 weeks for a dangerous tackle in last week's match against Australia, meaning he'll miss the remainder of the Tri-Nations tournament. In news from New York, the NBA season will begin on the 22nd of December after an agreement was reached with players over scheduling, salary figures, and free agency dates. And in California, Brooks Koepka insists he has overcome any nagging concerns over knee and hip injuries ahead of the Masters, his 3rd tournament back from a 2-month injury layoff.
We'll dive into the play of the day, Wacky Wednesday. Then it's the beautiful game. In the international break, it kicks into gear with Spain coach Luis Enrique saying his team's real level will be seen at the Euros next year ahead of Spain's high-profile friendly with the Netherlands tonight. Germany coach Joachim Löw, Yogi Löw, says Die Mannschafts' young team will need to be given time to improve and dispel a cloud hanging over the team after their recent performances. And Neymar will miss Brazil's World Cup qualifier against Venezuela on Friday because of a thigh injury, but he will travel with the team in hopes he will be fit to play 4 days later against Uruguay. All of that and so much more to look forward to on this edition of ZiFM Sport. But first is our power play. This track is by Killer T, and he says that kugeto takusaiza corona. The track is called Corona.
The Warriors, the Chevrons, the Cheetahs, the Mighty Warriors, and the Sables. From the pool to the track to the field, we are Team Zimbabwe. The Home Front. Local sports news and analysis.
Don't forget to get in touch with us with your thoughts, your views, your take on what's happening in the world of sport, especially this week. A big week for the Warriors. Back-to-back qualifiers versus the African champions, Algeria. We are away in Algiers, and then next week on Monday, it's at the Giant National Sports Stadium. It's usually a cauldron when it's full of fans, but this time there shouldn't be more than 100 people at the stadium. So the Warriors will have to negotiate themselves past that little obstacle of not having a vociferous home crowd to try and close the gap with the likes of Riyad Mahrez and boys. Now, talking about the Warriors, their coach Zdravko Logarusic says that he's concerned about a lack of game time for crucial players at their respective clubs ahead of the back-to-back fixtures against Algeria. The Warriors, of course, square off for the Desert Foxes in those back-to-back qualifiers that I've talked about. Now, before we get into our discussion, let's hear from some of the Warriors ahead of tomorrow's encounter. Here is King Nadolo of Dynamos. Then we'll get to hear David Moyo. He's the one with the Brit accent. And then Prince Dube playing for Azam in Tanzania. Back to another Brit accent, Alec Mudimu.
I'm just going to try my best to do the business. I'm just gelling with other players. I'm not being treated like the only local best, but I'm blessed. I feel happy. I feel blessed to be the only local player rubbing shoulders with these big guys.
There's always expectation to perform, and I guess that's only the pressure you put on yourself. I'm sure no matter what, the fans and your family will always be proud of you no matter what. But yourself as a player, you have to have that split mentality where it drives you even more. And you want to play, you want to show what you're good at. You want to show your teammates that you'll do anything for them on the pitch and stuff.
We just have to do our best, go there with a positive mind, believe in ourselves, I think maybe if we do that, we can come up with a positive result.
Algeria are unbeaten in so many matches, so it makes the game even more tough, but we prepare like we've always prepared before, and I think mentally everybody's is more than happy. Physically we're in good shape, players have been playing, and when we go there we have a game plan and we're going to stick to the game plan.
Barry, before we get to the sentiments of Zdravko Logarusic, just interesting sentiments coming out of our lads there that we just heard from, and also just a slightly different mindset, isn't it, between King Nadolo, who plays his football for Dynamos in the local league, and when you listen to the likes of David Moyo, Alec Mudimu, and even Prince Dube.
Yeah, absolutely. You got King Nadolo, who is just happy to be there, talking about the fact that he's blessed to have been selected and be the only locally based warrior in the squad. I think that that almost directs attention to himself and thinking about how good it is for him, whereas the other three are talking about the team and how they can help the team and contribute and fight for the Warriors. So the mindset is very different in that I don't think King Nadolo is expecting to see any game time, and he's settled in his mind that it's about him.
Chris, does this concern you? Because the mindset is going to be a crucial thing over the course of the next 7 or so days as we are playing the African champions, the best team on the continent. Zimbabwe has to have it all together between the ears.
All together between the ears, and one hopes that in terms of the coaching staff that we have for the national team, that someone has their attention on exactly how our boys are thinking, what their mental state is like, because that's a very critical part of it. It's very easy, I think, for our players to possibly close themselves up and say, you know what, this is a team we're never going to win against, and to obviously then not be able to perform. So in as much as this is a team we're going up against, knowing we're going into this as underdogs, they need to have the right mindset if we're even going to have some sort of respectable result come out of this.
And now let's go to Zdravko Logarusic, Barry. He's already talked about the fact that he's concerned that some of the key players for the Warriors don't have enough competitive game time under their belts. Case and point is Marvelous Nakamba, arguably our most high-profile player. He plays for Aston Villa out in the English Premier League, but he's hardly had a kick of football. He's hardly had a lick, and I think the only game that he's played 90 minutes was the cup game that he played. Yeah. I think the Carabao Cup has been renamed now. Could be anything. I think it's named after a pizza company now, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. I think that's the route that they've gone. And look, in truth, it is a desperate concern for the coach, because that lack of game time, the whole thing about calling the internationals is a question of quality, but also a question of game time, because obviously our local game isn't in any shape or form beginning to stir up and play games. So he wants players who've had game time. The tragedy is that although the European leagues are underway and are playing, the teams in which our players are playing our players aren't getting enough game time. You could say the same for teenage Radebe, the likes of Alec Mudimu, who aren't getting as much game time as the coach would have wanted. So it's a genuine concern on the basis that these are the ones who are going to form the spine, the stem that's going to be tested against the likes of Riyad Mahrez, Ben Rama, your Fegulis of this world. Those players are going to run us ragged. So you need to have the legs.
Certainly need to have the legs, and the opposition here, Chris, is Algeria. They are bringing in players, arguably a squad that's probably made of European-based players. Will they be sort of like vulnerability on our players' end in terms of them taking a look at where they are playing? And where the opposition is playing. Never mind the fact that Algeria are already African champions. Never mind the fact that they've already got the likes of Riyad Mahrez, who is a world-class superstar and one of the best players in the world. Do you think that our players are going to be looking across the tunnel, as it were? I don't know what the setup is going to be in Algeria, but back then, you remember they used to line up one team next to each other for at least 5 minutes before walking onto the turf at the different stadium that they were playing. Do you think that there's going to be an element of that where our lads are looking across and saying to themselves, you know what, we're got our work cut out here and we probably don't have a chance. Let's just do our best.
It's definitely possible. And I think also, you know what, it's 2020. To some extent, they've probably gone online to see, okay, who are we playing against? These are sometimes players they've come across in the European leagues as well. So they know who they're coming up against. And that sort of intimidation is definitely going to be a factor when they're, you know, standing in the proverbial tunnel, taking a look at the team that they're going up against. These are players that they know are definitely better than them. And so that preparation, like we talked about mentally, is going to be absolutely important.
Barry, the Warriors have had a couple of days of preparation. You managed to run your eye over them at least once. What are your thoughts? I mean, are you convinced, first of all, by the level, the intensity that you saw in training? Are you convinced by some of the setup, some of the work you saw being done by Logarusic?
Look, it's hard to judge him because in truth, what they did mostly was just small-sided games. It looked more like a loosening up.
But is that what they're supposed to be doing with limited time in preparation for a big game like this?
I really don't think so. We've got a lot working against us because you look at the session that took place yesterday at the National Sports Stadium yesterday morning. You had a squad that has traveled long distances. Many of the English boys have done 9 and 12-hour flights in, and then they jumped onto a flight last night for another 9 hours into Algeria. So we've got a limited time in which we can work. I think the preference should have been towards team shaping, seeing whether the plan that Logarusic has is going to be executable with the playing staff that he's got. I eavesdropped on a conversation between him and one of his assistants, and the question that was asked sent shivers down my spine, where he was asking, has the keeper from Zambia arrived? Obviously talking about Toba Chumba.
So he doesn't even know his name.
That question alone shows you that the coach doesn't. Maybe it slipped his mind. Let's try and mitigate. But he talked about him in the sense of the keeper from Zambia. Now you don't know your players. You don't know what they can do. You don't know what knowledge can do. You know what they can deliver in your system. So you've got to take advantage of the time that you have with them to shape your team and know that the plan that you want to execute is executable with the talent you've got. I don't think a small-sided game was the right choice, although I'm not a coach.
No, Barry, I think you're being very nice about this. When a coach talks about the keeper from Zambia, and yet he's the one who's supposed to have called up that player, for me, that's a red flag already. It shows you that he doesn't know the player, and he's likely not the one who called him up, because if he was the one who called him up, he would have known his name. So already, you know, this squad here, man, there are lots of questions that we have and a lot of answers that we need. But one of the things, Barry, that you did say is that you are not a coach. The coach is Zdravko Logarusic, and Zdravko Logarusic will be judged, Chris, by results. And one of the best ways that he can endear himself to the media and to local sports fans, especially local football fans, is by getting positive results. It doesn't matter how shambolic the preparations are looking. Doesn't matter whether he knows the names of players, whether he knows it's Talbot or it's the keeper from Zambia. As long as he puts in good performances and he gets positive results, it'll get the fans quickly on side.
It'll get the fans quickly on side, and I think that's something he's looking at to say in order for, any kind of mending the relationship between himself, the media, Zimbabwean football fans. He's going to need to be producing those results. He's got a tough task ahead of him. My only worry is that just from like what Barry said, there's a bit of a connotation almost that there's this over-reliance on the brilliance, the individual brilliance of these players, not necessarily the kind of tactics that he's going to be working on, the work he's put in, but just to say, you've got brilliant stars and hopefully they just do the job.
So by that, you're meaning that we're expecting Knowledge Musona to shine, we're expecting some magic from Kama Billiot, we're expecting Marvelous Nakamba to have a barnstorming game. And so anyway, well, we'll judge him by results, and we want to hear from you guys, your thoughts, your views. What are your predictions? Will Zimbabwe carry the day out in Algiers? Can we beat Algeria? It'll be something of an upset if we do, just judging by where the teams are ranked, both in Africa as well as globally. I think Zimbabwe currently ranked number 111, if not number 113. So we are right at the bottom out. Algeria are the defending African champions. Can we beat them? Can the Warriors rise to the occasion? Send us your predictions at ZiFM Sport on Twitter.
Hi, I'm Warriors coach Zdravko Logarusic, and you are listening to ZiFM Sport.
Sports with a difference.
Time for a local sports news roundup, starting with cricket, where the International Cricket Council have congratulated former Zimbabwe captain Elton Chigumbura, LT, for a successful career that saw him compete in all three formats over a period of 16 years. The 34-year-old, a regular at top ICC events, including 3 Men's Cricket World Cups and 5 T20 World Cups, decided to retire after the T20 International Series against Pakistan in Rawalpindi. The T20 series wrapped up yesterday with Usman Khadir playing a starring role as Pakistan secured a T20 series sweep over Zimbabwe with an 8-wicket win. In hockey news, Zimbabwe will host the men's and women's Southern African qualifier for the 2021 Hockey Africa Cup of Nations at St. John's College in Harare from the 19th to the 27th of February next year. The men and women's teams will face Southern African countries in a competition in which the top 2 nations in each category will proceed to next year's Cup of Nations finals. The Secretary General of the Hockey Association of Zimbabwe Sarah Bennett, said although the COVID-19 outbreak affected their preparations, the association did its best to keep the players in good shape. We'll wrap it up with handball news, where Zimbabwe's hope of hosting this year's edition of the IHF Trophy Zone 6 still hangs in the balance, as countries that are supposed to participate are yet to get approval from their respective governments amid the COVID-19 pandemic. But the National Federation got the right to host the regional tournament following a successful bid last year. The president of the Zimbabwe Handball Federation, Stuart Sanewe, said that the association was still waiting for government to approve their submissions.
Hi, this is Mike Madoda, and you can catch me and the team for all the latest breaking news out of the world of sport, local as well as international, on your favorite station, my station, your station, ZiFM. We are Z-Team on ZiFM Sport.
Z. From the front of the grid to the back of the net, it's ZiFM Sport. International Sports News Roundup, where the world comes out to play.
In our international sports news today, we wrap up the IPL for you, and Mumbai Indians secured a 5th Indian Premier League title with a 5-wicket win over Delhi Capitals in the final. Mumbai, the most successful team in IPL history, chased 157 with 8 balls to spare as captain Rohit Sharma hit 68. Trent Boult took 3 for 30 for Mumbai, including Marcus Stoinis with the first ball of the match in Dubai. So your scorecard for the IPL final: Delhi Capitals putting up 156 for 7, Aya with 65, an unbeaten 65, Pant with 56, Trent Bolt taking 3 for 30, and Kultanal 2 for 29. Mumbai Indians chasing that down and scoring 157 for the loss of only 5 wickets. Rohit Sharma with that 68 we mentioned earlier, Kishan an unbeaten 33, and then Nokia taking 2 for 25, meaning that the Mumbai Indians won by 5 wickets. Let's hear from the winning captain, Rohit Sharma, who led his team to victory.
No, there was no strategy as such. I just wanted to, be positive in my thought process. And, the Ashwin is their key bowler, and just wanted to put pressure on their key bowler. That was the thought behind it. He's a quality bowler, no doubt about it. That was a thought, and then it came off pretty well. When you're chasing a target like that, you want to get off to a good start and make sure there is no pressure towards the back end. So we wanted to make sure that we, try and capitalize on the first 3-4 overs, and then we can take our time and bat the conditions.
It was the 2 top performing teams in the league phase of this competition, and rightfully in the final. But the final itself, Mumbai Indians making it look easy, Mikey.
Yeah, absolutely. And congratulations to Chris. She predicted that these 2 teams will be in the final. She didn't quite nail Mumbai Indians. She had put her money on Delhi Capitals. And just taking a look at this game, Barry, for me, there were 2 crucial things that happened. Marcus Stoinis going first ball at the top of the order for Delhi Capitals. That was a big blow, because he's the guy who was supposed to give their innings impetus. And so instead of Delhi Capitals scoring what would have been a competitive 180, 190, or even 200, they ended up scoring a below par 156 for 7, mainly because their top order never really got going, Barry. Stoinis out for a golden duck. Shikhar Dhawan struggled to 15. Then you had Ajinkya Rahane, he made 2. So the top of the order failed. If you take a look at the Mumbai Indians, it's exactly the opposite. The top of the order fired. Rohit Sharma, the skipper himself, 68 from 51. He struck 4 magnificent sixes and 5 fours. Then Quinton de Kock, he went in, stayed a bit, and then he went out. He made 20. Yadav 19. Kishan made 33. So their top order fired. And then for the Delhi Capitals, it took the middle order, Aya as well as Pant, to try and give some respectability to the innings. But you and I know, Barry, that if you're to set up a match-winning score in T20 international cricket, unless you have a very dynamic innings in the middle order, or someone goes berserk at that stage of the game, you need your top order to be firing. And that's where the Mumbai Indians won the game.
100%, and well put there, Michael, because I think the top order of the Mumbai Indians are what set the platform. And in truth, the middle order wasn't necessarily required in the end, because they just had to see it home. And that's exactly what you'd have needed, Delhi Capitals getting the opposite. But you got to say, Chris, that also everything rises and falls on leadership. And to be honest, Rohit Sharma has led this team ably, and did so even in this final, because you look at his pace bowlers, Nathan Coulter-Nile, your Trent Bolt of this world, they certainly fired, and you could see that the decision making by Rohit Sharma also got the team over the line.
It definitely got the team over the line, and I think we've seen it consistently throughout the tournament. That's the thing about this team, is they've been good throughout the tournament, and I think they just managed to come into this final off the back of that, off the back of good leadership, good decision making, and that's what managed to get them this win.
That stayed together for quite a bit, and I know this is their 5th title, but because of them staying together, a team that even when they go into the auction, they buy clever, they buy quality, Mike. You got to say that they've had almost the rub of the green, along with some talented strategy as well.
Yeah, Barry, I think strategy. I'll ascribe it more to strategy. They buy well when they go to auction. And that's why, if you take a look at their squad, they've got the most balanced squad in the IPL. And the results are telling. That's why they've been so dominant in this competition, because they've got a team that can perform they've got the bowlers in their ranks, and they've also got the batsmen. They bat deep down, Barry, because even though the likes of Pollard in this final, the likes of Pandya didn't fire, both Pandyas, that is, didn't fire in this game, that didn't matter much because you had the likes of Sharma, Yadav, De Kock at the top of the order. We had already done the business. The other franchises, Barry, are usually dependent on 3 players that if they don't do so well with the bat, then it's likely that they're going to underperform. So you take a look at Sunrisers Hyderabad. Everyone knew in that game, once David Warner went cheaply, it was almost game up because they were only then left with just 1 or 2 guys who could actually carry the team. And the same applies to almost every other team in the IPL. I think they have to be as strategic as the Mumbai Indians. And the reason why Delhi Capitals for me are a good story because they have got a similar model to the Mumbai Indians. It's just that they have got inexperience, but you can see that if they recruit a couple more times in the next couple of seasons, or even just next season, with the type of leadership they have with Ricky Ponting and the young players that they have, they're a team that can only get better. Whereas the Mumbai Indians, I think, have hit their peak, and very soon they're going to be on the downward curve.
Yeah, and when they're on the downward curve, whether they are or not, you got to say to yourself, Chris, that the Delhi Capitals are going to be a factor. And Mike points out the issue of leadership and also the shrewd recruitment. You look at it, albeit that they lost in this final, they have the top wicket taker in the competition, Kagiso Rabada. And yes, they put quite a bit of weight on him because of the low total that they put up. But when you've got a KG in your bowling lineup, you've always got a chance.
You've always got a chance, and defending that low total, like you said, was always going to be tricky for him. He did what he could, but he conceded 18 from his first over, which is, in when you're defending such a low total, it's quite a bit. So I think all that pressure on him had a big impact. But look, like Mike said, this is a team that's also coming into this as underdogs. It was their first final, and they can only get better from here because of those individual players that they have in their team who can actually show up.
They targeted him, Barry, didn't they? And that's the value of experience. I did mention that the Mumbai Indians are a very experienced team, and you could tell that they had a very deliberate ploy to say, okay, Kagiso Rabada, you've had a good tournament, you've been a wicket taker, you're their best bowler. What are we going to do? We're going to come after you, because if we come after you, if we hit you out of the attack, it means that the rest of the bowling attack is not going to be as confident as they would be if you take 1 or 2 wickets. So they deliberately targeted him, hit him out of the attack. 18 runs in 1 over, Barry. That was quite some doing by Rohit Sharma, who was doing most of the damage.
Indeed, Mike, a phenomenal performance by the Mumbai Indians, the champions of the IPL, the 2020 edition. Just to wrap it up with some facts and stats, most runs, the top batter in the competition, KL Rahul of Kings 11 Punjab, putting up 670 runs for the competition. And the most wickets taken, the top wicket taker, KG, Kagiso Rabada of the Delhi Capitals, and of course South Africa, taking 30 wickets. The MVP of the tournament, Jofra Archer, he wins the IPL 2020 MVP award. And you got to think to yourself that come the next auction, the next edition, he's set for a massive bumper contract, which will likely include 6 or 7 figures.
Hi, my name is Sean Williams, Zimbabwe cricket captain. You're listening to ZiFM Sport.
Z. Around the world in 60 seconds. International sports news.
We take off in Brisbane, where All Blacks prop Tuanga Fassi has been suspended for 3 weeks for a dangerous tackle in last week's match against Australia, meaning he'll miss the remainder of the Tri-Nations tournament. Tuanga Fassi was red carded for a reckless hit on Wallaby number 14 Tom Wright, and Australian flanker Lachlan Swinton was also sent off for a high tackle. The competition's governing body, SANZAR, had already suspended Swinton for 4 weeks and said Tuanga Fassi's lighter ban was because of his quick guilty plea and clean record. We head over to New York, where the NBA season will begin on the 22nd of December after an agreement was reached with players over scheduling, salary figures, and free agency dates. The usual season start date in October was pushed back because the coronavirus pandemic caused delays to the 2019-2020 campaign. But the NBA and its players union have agreed a new date and a 72-game season, a reduction on a usual campaign. We'll touch down in California, where Brooks Koepka insists he has overcome any nagging concerns over knee and hip injuries ahead of the Masters. His third tournament back from a 2-month injury layoff. The 30-year-old American, who finished runner-up to Tiger Woods at last year's Augusta National, had stem cell therapy injections in his left knee during his hiatus to help repair a partially torn patella tendon, and also had a cortisone injection in his ailing hip. Don't miss tomorrow's show, where we'll preview the Masters, a tradition unlike any other.
Hi, I'm Clemens Matau, chicken in midfielder. You're listening to ZiFM Sports.
The big leagues, the big teams, the big players. The beautiful game on ZiFM Sport.
It's the international break, meaning that the big leagues are taking a break for at least a couple of weeks whilst the international teams go head to head. As we talked about earlier, AFCON qualifiers here on the continent and in Europe. There's also the small matter, of course, of teams that are playing in the Nations League, as well as, of course, preparing for the European Championships that will be played next year. Now, I want to ask you this, Chris. I mean, do you suffer withdrawal symptoms during this time when there's no league football? Because a lot of fans do.
A little bit, yeah. Okay, no, I think I'm making it modest. I do suffer from withdrawal symptoms. I think that consistent action, seeing multiple stars across multiple leagues at the same time, there's no way you're going to take a break from that and not miss it.
And Barry, the news does come in a bit slower when it's an international week or an international weekend. You know, we don't have the updates on injury updates and the debate in the press, in the media around the performances of teams, what it means for the log standings, this weekend's fixtures, midweek fixtures. We don't have that deluge of news coming in when it's an international break.
You're so right, and that means that there's a slowing down of the pace. So immediately we go from the high of having that high octane day by day, almost minute by minute, hour by hour update of what's happening within those leagues that Chris was talking about. And then we're into the international break. And the international break, let's be fair, only about 20% of the games that are played across the world are actually worth anything. The ones that we want to watch, the ones that are significant, are out in South America, and they take place at 3 a.m, so we can't watch it anywhere. So consequently, there is a real problem when it comes to the international break, and I hope that the football aficionados are looking at this thing.
Well, we've done our best to try and bring up some stories that are worth discussing here on ZiFM Sport. And Spain coach Luis Enrique says that his team's real level will be seen at the Euros next year ahead of Spain's high-profile friendly with Netherlands tonight. Spain's last game was a shock 1-0 loss to the Ukraine in Kiev, and they have largely been impressive in recent games under Luis Enrique, but face a decisive Nations League week ahead of them as well. So, Spain buying a bit of time there, Chris. Their coach saying, hey, you know what? We're going to peak next year. Don't judge us yet. Right now, everything builds up to the Euros.
Everything builds up to the Euros, and I think Luis Enrique is quite smart in making these kind of statements, because what he's intentionally doing is that he's tempering those expectations of what people expect from a team like Spain. So at the moment, he's just telling everybody not to necessarily look at performances right now and judge them quite completely on them, but to look forward to what's going to be happening next year, which I think is a clever way of doing things, because even for him as a coach, it almost does a bit in terms of maybe reducing that pressure on him.
What team do you support, Chris? I've never asked you that internationally. I know you're a United fan. I hope you support Zimbabwe on the continent. But what international team do you back?
I love the France team. I think just most recently, I think they've been the team that has excited me the most. Some of my favorite players are in that team as well. And I like the music around the French team. So
it's amazing, Barry, what the inspiration is for so many people. I remember this one time, I think it was the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. And so I asked my sister, hey, what team are you backing? And she's like, I'm supporting Spain. Now I thought, oh my God, I'm impressed. You actually know the team that's probably going to win the World Cup tournament. But her reason was Spain has got all the cute guys.
No.
So it's a good enough reason, Mike.
And in truth,
that was her reason.
It did. It's one of the best looking teams, and also ended up being the world champions as well. So motivation can be very different. The only thing is that Chris is almost lazy because the music around the French team is very African. So listen, you can't go. You can't step further, or you can't be as close to Africa as you are when you support France.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the Dutch, Barry. The music not so great, but they've been on an upward trajectory over the last 2 years, especially under Ronald Koeman. Ronald Koeman is now left. He's gone over to Barcelona, replaced by Frank de Boer, and it's been a very unconvincing start to Frank de Boer's tenure as head coach of the Dutch team. And there are fears that the team may be stalling again since the departure of Ronald Koeman, who really looked like a hand in glove with the Dutch international football system.
Well, Frank de Boer's first 3 games didn't win a single game and only scored 1 goal. That 1-0 loss to Mexico, followed up by the 0-0 draw with the Bosnians, and then the 1-1 draw in Bergamo against the Italians. So it hasn't been it's been an ignominious start for Frank de Boer, especially coming off the high of being under the tutelage of Ronald Koeman. This was a team that everyone was touting as certs for being in the last 4 in the European Championships. Everyone was saying that they will make a dent in the next World Cup in Qatar. So everyone was looking towards Oranje being the team to beat. Now they've sort of been destabilized. I think it's a feather in the cap of Ronald Koeman because it shows the work that he was doing was significant. Yes, it's got good players. Yes, it's got the talent. Virgil van Dijk won't be available to them. But if we go back to the Koeman era, Virgil van Dijk was at the center of that, Gini Wijnaldum's, your Memphis Depay's. It was a team that was solid, that had balance and was moving in the right direction. It hasn't quite started that way for Frank de Boer. I have no doubt he'll get it back on the rails, but it's taking a bit of time.
It's taking a bit of time, and of course the work is made doubly difficult by some of the absentees within the Dutch national team, mainly Virgil van Dijk missing from the heart of their defense, as is Mathis de Ligt as well of Juventus. He's also missing. That's the first choice centre-back partnership missing for Frank de Boer at a time when he really needed those players, because those were the 2 on-field leaders for the Dutch national team, especially Virgil van Dijk as the captain.
And then he then has to then do what Zdravko Logarusic was complaining about when it comes to Zimbabwe, because he's now got to pick Nathan Ake, who in truth isn't getting as much game time at Manchester City as we expected him to. First few games, Pep was trusting him, but as soon as he signed the Diaz's of this world, Nathan Ake has been reduced to a squad player. So consequently, Oranje has got a lot of thinking and soul searching to do to see what sort of balance they can come up with the absentees and the players that are available.
So all this said, Chris, it means that this is a game that Spain can't afford to lose, because a lot of people look to the, I wouldn't want to use the word chaos in the Dutch camp, but to the disruption that has been caused by Ronald Koeman moving on, injuries to various key players. And people will be saying, yes, Luis Enrique, you're talking about next year, you're talking about the European Championships, but still, this is a game that you have to win versus the Dutch.
This is 100% a game they have to win, and I don't think people would be very forgiving if they didn't manage to get a win over a Netherlands side that's significantly weakened, like you mentioned, those injuries to some of their key players. If ever they were going to manage to get a convincing win against the Netherlands, now is the time. So failure to do so, I think, is going to put Luis Enrique under the pressure that he's sort of trying to avoid.
All right, let's talk about the Germans. Die Mannschaft, of course, coached by Joachim Löw. Now, he says that his young team will need to be given time to improve and dispel a cloud hanging over the team after their recent performances. Team director Oliver Bierhoff, himself a legend of Die Mannschaft, has complained about a dark cloud over the team following their 1 win and 4 draws in their last 5 games, as viewing figures drop and criticism in the media grows louder and louder. It is a restive society in Germany, because they have been almost spoilt by the years of success that they've enjoyed under Jogi Löw. And now that there's the first sort of shoot of trouble, they are in an absolute tiz, both media and the fans in Germany. How does Jogi Löw pull this out of the fire, Mikey, apart from winning games?
He has to win games, Barry, because I think that is the pressure of expectation that comes with teams like Germany. Those are teams that have been built using a DNA that equates to success. So everything about Germany is about performing well. It's about winning matches. It's about challenging for the European Championship. It's about winning World Cups. That's why they are very successful. They've got an elite sporting mindset when it comes to their football. And so he's under pressure. The only problem, Barry, is that he's a guy who's negotiating his way through a transition. There are a lot of players that have sort of like reached the peak of their careers, that they've been shown the exit door, and he's had to blood in the new stars. So guys like Mats Hummels and Thomas Muller, who I thought prematurely were shown the exit door, because I think they can still cut it at this level. Because if you're cutting it in the Bundesliga, cutting it in the Champions League and performing better than the younger players, I think you should be playing. So he's having to bring in the new wave, the new generation, your Leroy Sané's that had been overlooked in previous generations or in previous squads heading into major tournaments. He's now an integral part of Die Mannschaft. Your Gnabry's are now integral part of that setup, as he has been over the last 18 months. And so that's the thing with Joachim Löw. Now he's going to be missing Joshua Kimmich, who's one of his best players and has been one of the best players at Bayern Munich and Germany for the last 2 seasons. He's been injured out until January. And so the only positive I'm looking at is the goalkeeping department, which remains world-class. You got Manuel Neuer, and then you got Ter Stegen, who's come back and reminded us why a lot of people think he's the best goalkeeper in the world with the performances that he's put in for Barcelona. So very comfortable in that department. But everywhere else, Germany's still trying to find their feet.
And finding their feet, they must, because, look, it's only a matter of time before Joachim Löw is going to be held to account for the results that Die Mannschaft is experiencing. Chris, would you reckon that he was, and Mike points out some of the players that were prematurely pulled out of that squad, and you can sort of understand why, because when Joachim Löw was retained after his contract ran out, everyone was calling for refreshing of the team, and one of the refreshment was going to be to come up to have a new coach. He then had a pressure upon him to show that he could renew the team and renew the way that Germany was playing, and the one-way team, a young team that could still do the business. It hasn't turned out that way. The young team hasn't settled.
That young team hasn't settled. And if you take a look at some of those players that, like Mike mentioned, Thomas Muller, Jerome Boateng, Mats Hummels, those are some of the players that they have been playing well for their clubs recently. Yeah. So those are the kind of players that we'll be looking at, and the fans will be looking at, to say, okay, he's making all of these changes and all these decisions, and this club, this team is unstable at the moment. So just his decision making will always come into question. And as much as he was under pressure to show that he's refreshing the team, that he's doing things differently, those decisions put him under even more spotlight and under more pressure now. If you take a look at the fact that this team is now extremely young, there's inexperience, it's going to need time to gel, and just it keeps the pressure on him. Regardless of what decisions he could have made at the moment, there's still a lot of pressure on him as a coach to show that, first of all, he has what it takes to make sure that Germany goes back to winning ways, to make sure that they're still superior in Europe. And so he'll always have that pressure. His decision making is a bit wonky, looks a bit wonky now in hindsight, obviously, because of those players who are now performing extremely well. And the team is looking a bit misshapen at the moment.
Yeah, and hindsight is a perfect science. That's why we love it as pundits, because we can always look back and look wise after the fact. Mike, there's no doubt that the quality in that team it's unquestionable because of the academy system in Germany. So we've got to look at the dugout, don't we? At what point do they make the decision as to whether they go forward with Jogi Löw or they cut ties and try to look in another direction?
Germans have never been reactionary, Barry. They are very solid, very calm. I don't expect them to move on from Jogi Löw. I think he'll leave on his own terms. Remember, Bertie Vogts, as bad as he was, they stuck with him. So I expect them to do the same for Joachim Löw, who's a World Cup winning coach.
Yeah, World Cup winning coach. Let's not forget that. So put some respect on that name. It's selected international friendlies tonight. Germany takes on the Czech Republic. Denmark versus Sweden. It's Belgium versus Switzerland. Italy will take on Estonia. The one we spoke about, Netherlands will take on Spain, which is probably the marquee fixture. And then Poland will take on Ukraine. Portugal versus Andorra. And France, Chris's team, will take on Finland.
Let's wrap it up with some news out of St. George's Park. Mason Mount believes any comparisons with his England teammate Jack Grealish are unwarranted and insists the pair could play together in the same side. Plenty of supporters were clamoring for Aston Villa captain Grealish to start the Two Nations League games last month after he made his full debut in the win over Wales. Mike, for you, this comparison and Mount actually taking quite a bit of flack on social media, being named ahead of Jack Grealish. Is there any warranted comparison between these two players?
I think he knows that his place is the one that's most vulnerable. If Jack Grealish is to be given the nod to play for England, as a lot of people are demanding, and I'm one of those people who believes that Jack Grealish should be one of the first names on the team sheet for England, then Mason Mount is the most vulnerable player, because the likes of Jordan Henderson are players that are going to be selected in that team. Why? Because Jordan Henderson plays as the holding midfielder when he's playing for England, so his place is secure. So you have to take a look at the creative forces in that team. Do they drop the likes of Marcus Rashford? No. Do they drop Jadon Sancho? No. Do they drop Harry Kane? No. Do they drop Raheem Sterling? No. So the guy that looks most vulnerable, like I said, is Mason Mount, and therefore he's talking about them being able to play together. I don't think so. The only time that they'll play together is in a meaningless friendly versus Andorra or Liechtenstein.
Barry, taking a look at that, we've been talking a bit about decision making from these coaches. Gareth Southgate making that decision to start Mason Mount instead of Jack Grealish. Is that another indicator of the fact that Gareth Southgate may not necessarily be the best man for this job?
No, Gareth Southgate is the best man for the job, but I think that no one's on my feelings. I think that
Western Union. The man has got to you, Barry.
Mike. No, let's look at it from this perspective. Yes, Mike, and I know that detractors like yourself, dark forces like Mike.
Wait, before you go on, I'm going to ask you a simple question. Who would you rather have as manager of England, Arsene Wenger or Gareth Southgate?
I would say Arsene Wenger. I'd say Arsene Wenger on the basis.
Who would you rather have as England manager, Mauricio Pochettino or Gareth Southgate?
Watch.
Thank you.
You see, you're being unfair.
Thank you. Those two guys are all available and would do the job if asked. Southgate is just in a job because he's an Englishman. That's it. It's the tradition, Harry, from FA.
One of them is available, Mike. Mdara Wenger is doing his work out of FIFA. Poch is available, certainly. And I think that
if he was doing any work, Barry, we would have banned VAR by now. The man is he's doing as bad a job as he did in his last year with Arsenal.
The VAR, indeed. But let me justify my case, because I believe that, look, it wasn't a fluke, and I know that detractors like yourself will just say that he had a good run of fixtures in the World Cup and ultimately got to the semi-finals. But he got to the semi-finals of the World Cup. You can't be bad if you get to the semi-final of a World Cup. He just needs to select a better side and stick to it. I know you guys want to jump on me for my comments about Gareth Southgate, but we're out of time, guys. So we're going to end the show. But remember that Brazil is in action against Venezuela. They've taken Neymar with them, hoping that he'll be fit enough to play against Uruguay. He's definitely out for that fixture against Venezuela. On the continent, tonight's AFCON qualifiers, Guinea takes on Chad. Mauritania takes on Burundi, while Kenya versus the Comores, Cape Verde versus Rwanda, and it's Senegal versus Guinea-Bissau. Our Warriors are in action tomorrow, and we definitely say go Warriors, go. For now, may God richly bless you. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Manande, out.
And it's Messi! It is the cleanest of clean finishes from the best on the planet.
The biggest sports stories.
Liverpool, the champions of Europe, are top of the world.
The biggest interviews.
That such a great spectacle is ruined by such thuggish behavior.
And all the analysis right here.
He's the one player that has the arrogance to think that he can play in any stadium in the world and any pitch in the world in front of any player in the world and take them on.
Every weekday, it's my sport, it's your sport. It's ZiFM Sport on ZiFM Stereo. My station, your station.